I don't think the people who are currently trying to destroy our democracy have any idea how to deal with us. And I think we take that momentum and we freaking run with it.
We came to make a change.
Give it up for, well, Heather Cox Richardson, because I agree with that sign. I will never stop fighting until Heather Cox Richardson says I can. I know we all agree with that. Welcome to our Love America rally. Voting is about loving America. Marching is about loving America. And we are going to celebrate that tonight. And this is Red, Wine, and Blue. So you know we're going to be taking action together as a community. We are here tonight because we believe in fighting for the things we love. And we love this country enough to fight for it. You know, extremists tried pretty hard to label No King's Day the other day as some sort of hate America fest. And they just failed so miserably because so many of you out there for the very first time even were waving those American flags, spreading messages of patriotism, and doing so with so much joy and peacefulness. And gosh, my favorite thing is just the kindness out there. I loved getting to be alongside so many of you. I went to one rally with my family, bringing my children because we got to raise them right. And then I went to two more because I couldn't get enough of it. And I wanted to experience different towns across my region. And that feeling of joy and kindness and patriotism was consistent everywhere. And so we want to keep that going tonight. And who better of a person to do it with than, of course, our beloved, knowledgeable rock star, Heather Cox Richardson. It is so important, before I bring on Heather, I have to say it is so important right now, that we keep this momentum going. If you hang out with us pretty often here at Red, Wine, and Blue, you know that we've got 53,000 local elections coming up all across this country, school board, municipal elections, school levies and bonds and millages, and some statewide elections too in places like New Jersey and California and Virginia. And we are going to be giving you all an opportunity to come together and take action to make the biggest difference you possibly can in those races exactly where you live tonight. So that's the agenda. We're going to hear from Heather and some special guests. And we are going to meet up in after parties to take action together. And then we're going to stay in touch every day from now through this election day, and then every day and week and month through 2026 and beyond after that. Red, Wine, and Blue has made connecting in all those in-between moments easier than ever. Many of you know that Red, Wine, and Blue just in the last couple of months launched an app. It's called the Red, Wine, and Blue app. And almost 28,000 of you have gone and gotten on the app so that we can have this level of connectivity and we can have our own spaces that the tech billionaire bros do not control. If you are not there yet, please take a moment now, flip on over to your app store, wherever you go to download apps on your phone. It takes like 1 minute. We'll ask a few questions just so we can get to know you better and make sure to be in touch with you in the right ways. But join us and be in the chat. Join our friend-to-friend organizing program there. You can use the app to find your local Red, Wine, and Blue affiliate group across the country. Come and be with us if you're not there already. We need you. So we're glad you're here. We'll see you on the app too. And with that, let's get started with this Love America rally tonight. Heather Cox Richardson, are you in the house?
I am, Katie. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad you did this. You know, it's bothered me for a long time that it seemed to me that the real people who make up America, the decent people who make up America, had ceded the American flag. And it's high time we take it back because we really are the backbone of this country. And we get to redefine it into something that can carry us into the 21st century in a much healthier way than we've lived for the past 40 years. So let's freaking do this.
Heather, the No Kings rallies saw incredible turnout across the country. I've seen 7 million in some places, 8 million in some places, certainly many millions more than the previous No Kings Day and any other day of protest that we have ever seen in our history. What does this kind of large-scale engagement signal to you at this moment?
Well, so exactly what you said is important here, is that the numbers were bigger. That's what you want to do is you want to have momentum going. And I happened to be on a thing with Senator Ruben Gallego just before the No Kings Day, and one of the things he said that they talk about in the Marines is that you want to keep momentum. He said hesitation kills, momentum rules the day. And the other thing he said was that if you aren't, obviously you can't always be moving forward, but if you're not moving forward, you need to be communicating, which I thought was really an effective way to think about that. But if you think about the No Kings Day, what that signaled about the people who are standing up for America right now. One of the things that I think is interesting is the way that those people trying to denigrate No King's Day first said that everybody who was going to turn out hated America. And then, of course, we all turned out with flags and those suits and the kids and the dancing and, the music, and that didn't
Sure did.
fly. So then they said, well, it was all old people. Well, that's really interesting because I think it's true. And I think it's important for not entirely, but I think it is true that there are older people because we remember when America used to work and we want to hand that down to our children and grandchildren. But also, I think there's something else going on that Red, Wine, and Blue has tapped into really effectively. And that is we are the first generation of women who have 20 to 30 years after our kids leave home, after we have, gone as far as we want in our careers, and we have connections and we have skills and sometimes we have money and we have ideas about how the world should be. And honestly, I don't think the people who are currently trying to destroy our democracy have any idea how to deal with us. And I think we take that momentum and we freaking run with it from now on until we manage to reestablish a real democracy in this country.
Why was there such a desperate attempt? First, I loved the idea that I think Donald Trump himself said, no one's going to show up for that. Nobody's going to be
Yeah,
there.
well, now he says nobody did show up.
Oh, right. Sure. Why not? But what is this obsession with extremists labeling patriotic Americans, patriots for as long as I'm aware of the history of our country, standing up to the idea of there being no kings in this country? When did that become a thing? Like, no, instead we're going to call them un-American, that they hate America and sort of weaponize this idea of patriotism. Do you know like when that started and what's going on there?
Well, there's a lot of things going on, but there is the issue that the Republican Party has had really since the 1960s and the Vietnam War, in which those people who supported what President Richard M. Nixon was doing in Vietnam and Cambodia as being really truly America's greatest interests. And they took those people who were objecting to that. And those are not only the anti-war people, but also those different people who were involved in civil rights movements that often overlapped with anti-war protests and started to say that all of those people were anti-American. And you can see that line continuing, that if you believed in America using its military power to expand a certain kind of power overseas, if you objected to that, you were anti-American. And you saw that it attempted to be turned into a real weapon under the George W. Bush administration, when quite deliberately they used the idea of supporting George W. Bush's war on terror in Iraq and Afghanistan as being, you must be for this or you are anti-American. And that really messed a lot of people up because it was, in fact, really the part of patriotism to say, hey, there aren't weapons of mass destruction here and things like that. And so I think that there has been this conflation of this strong overseas military with patriotism. And those people who were interested in protecting America at home ended up sounding as if they were unpatriotic. And that's just completely wrong. So, to the degree that we can reclaim that and say, we care about America, we care about building a strong middle class, we care about civil rights, we care about an economy that is fair for people. Those are things that Americans, and especially our American heroes, have always stood on. The idea that that is not America is an utter perversion of the concept of patriotism. So one of the things that I keep urging people to do is, stand up and say, by God, yes, I am a great American like Frederick Douglass. I am a great American like Abraham Lincoln. I am a great American like Fannie Lou Hamer or Frances Perkins, because those are the people that we remember as being heroes, as opposed to saying, I'm a great American like the neo-Nazis. Not that's not a thing.
No, definitely not a thing. I want to name something, though, that I see happening sometimes, that there are people who feel that extremists have been so successful in terms of claiming patriotism as their own, using it as something instead of to unify us as Americans, to divide us against one another, that's been done in such a way that their reaction, out of, I think, very good intent of not wanting to associate with the people who are doing that, not wanting to associate with extremism, with attacks on any marginalized group of people. And so the reaction is sometimes to say, I don't want to take back the flag. I don't want to fly the flag. I'm worried that will indicate to people that I have values that are different than they actually are. I just want to name that because, I do hear that from well-meaning people oftentimes. And I'm just wondering what your advice or, guidance might be for people who feel that way, and why you feel, and I agree, that it is actually so important to not cede the American flag.
Well, first of all, we get to define things however we want them. But second of all, there is an issue when I think this comes largely out of the 1960s there, and perhaps to some degree out of the 1950s. There is this sense that if you are rah rah America, you are defending the idea of the attacks that this country has made in our history on marginalized peoples, on other countries, and so on. And it is possible both to believe in American democracy and believe it has not lived up to its potential and has done a lot of harm over time. But where I come down on that one is that if you are willing to throw out American democracy because of the horrible missteps we have made, what are you going to replace it with? Because from where I sit, I have never seen another system of government that offered the opportunity of so many people to control their own destinies as democracy does, or as American democracy has at its best. I mean, right now, we've slid away from democracy now. But if you don't believe that that's worth fighting for, what do you do with Ukraine? What do you do with Hungary? What do you do with all these countries where people are fighting desperately to reclaim the right to have a say in their lives and in their futures? And certainly, what do you do with the countries like Hungary under Orban, like Russia, like what's happening horrifically now in a number of countries where dictators are crushing the people and literally where death squads are going into hospitals and killing people? You can't look at American democracy and say, I would rather have that system. At least I can't. So I think it's fine to say, hey, I believe in American democracy. I also believe it's been perverted and that we have to do a better job of it. But I'm not willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And, I hear this every single time that I write something that is, sort of rah-rah-ish about our past. Because, yes, by definition, a democracy is never perfect because it is always under construction and people get hurt. There is no doubt about it. I mean, look at where women are right now in the 21st century in our society. And yet, I am not willing to give up on democracy because we have made mistakes, because I can't see a better system. Every other system that I can see devolves into an authoritarian system in which people get crushed unless they belong to the very small group at the very top that controls everything. And until you show me a better system than democracy, I'm all in on this one.
I so appreciate what you say about how loving our democracy and our country doesn't mean that you endorse every decision or the impacts of those decisions that have ever been made. It reminds me much of the controversies we've seen in the last few years around book bans and what lessons can be taught in school. And Americans seem to really understand, and the vast majority, in the 80% and upwards of that, of Americans say they want our kids to be taught the fullness of American history. In fact, they say, quote, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think that's because we as Americans understand that we are a project that we are continually improving upon. And how can we, ever form that more perfect union if we are not learning from the mistakes of our past. And
Humans are flawed by definition. Therefore, any government that we construct will be flawed along with us. But that doesn't mean we should get rid of it because of those flaws. And one of the things about the idea of a government based in the rule of law is that it's designed to provide channels for people's better impulses and ways to sort of have off routes for the worse impulses. And the fact that we are losing those guardrails, I think you can see by what's happening in our government, where instead of working on protecting virtues, we are protecting vices. And you look at the government right now, we're not doing very well.
okay, I want to talk about another aspect of this that I have seen you address quite a bit in your daily letters. And and this is another reason why I think it's so important not to cede patriotism and the flag. Because of course you see extremists on the other side holding on to the flag and claiming patriotism solely for themselves while doing that with their words, while with their actions attacking Americans, expressing such disdain for large swaths of American people. And it really not just being, Democrats or liberals or whatever divisive political language they want to do. I mean, look at the current attacks we're seeing in terms of the millions of Americans who rely on SNAP or rely on healthcare subsidies for their premiums for the Affordable Care Act. But I could list like some of these policies, but Heather, you have really poignantly for me pointed out recently just multiple examples of this administration showing true disdain for America and for Americans. And I think it's important as part of this to speak up about that as well. Can you just point to what you see as sort of some of the most important examples of that right now?
Well, yeah, it's important to remember that, and this is authoritarianism 101. Authoritarians divide a population in half. They create friends and enemies. And this is, there is a political theory that came out of Germany about this by a guy named Carl Schmitt, who goes on to become a Nazi. And he basically says, so long as you can divide your people between friends and enemies, you can get those friends next to you and they will do anything against those enemies. But it's not just Schmidt who talks about that. Hannah Arendt talks about it in her work. Eric Hoffer talks about it as well. But you don't even need any of them. You can simply look at what the Republican Party began to do under Richard Nixon when Pat Buchanan, who was a speechwriter under Nixon, said what we really have to do is create what he called positive polarization. That is, we have to divide the country in two because and it was positive in their minds, because if you convinced the Republican voters and the independents that the Democrats were the enemies, you would get them to turn out and vote. And that idea of dividing the country in half between friends and enemies, you can see that through the way President Donald Trump acts when anybody who turns against him, by definition, becomes a Democrat. Even somebody like James Comey, who was a Republican, or Robert Mueller, who was a Republican, or some of his own appointees, John Bolton, who is very much on the right wing. But the minute you turn against Trump, he calls you a Democrat, because he's trying to say there's the people who support me and there's everyone else. But what I see going on right now, and I think No King's Day has done it, but I think you see it in a number of other places, is that the American people are starting to wake up and put together a coalition that resonates with the idea of we the people, as opposed to us versus them, good guys versus bad guys, friends versus enemies. All of us against a small cabal that is trying to destroy our democracy. And in that organization, what letter it comes after your name politically, whether it's a D, an I, an R, or a Martian party, it doesn't matter, because what we're really doing is reinforcing American democracy. We, the people. And when we, the people, do that, not only can we take on somebody trying to impose an oligarchy or an authoritarian system on us, as we did in the 1850s and the 1890s and the 1920s, what we do is we redefine the nation. We come up with new ideas and new things that we care about. And one of the things that just fascinates me is when this happens, a lot of the people that we are now marching in solidarity with are people that 20 years ago, if you had told me that I would be friendly with, I would have been like, I'm sorry, I missed the news flash about hell freezing over. And yet, on the other side of this, when all of our issues change, you don't know who's going to be on your side and who's going to be on a different side. And it's kind of fun to be like, okay, who knows where we're going to be? Where we are right now is that we must get rid of those people trying to destroy our democracy. And once we've done that, then we'll sort ourselves out again. And when you do that, as I say, in the 1860s, in the 1890s, and the 1930s, what we ended up with was a dramatically expanded democracy and a whole new era. And it certainly feels like that's the direction we're headed.
I love so many of the comments in the chat, like there's no us and them, there's just USA. I mean, to me, that actually gets at this isn't just about the red, white, and blue and waving, this piece of fabric that carries so much symbolism. It's about something so much deeper, pushing back and against this very strategic attempt to divide us against one another. And I think refusing that very strategic attempt includes recognizing that it's happening and includes recognizing that we can undermine it by refusing to concede the things that they use to drive wedges, like patriotism, like faith. And if we, there's just tremendous power to create this ever widening, ever emboldened coalition that ends up having some pretty surprising and fun to see, allies coming together. So to me, there's just something very profound there, you all. Okay, this is a Love America rally. We told it, you all, wear your patriotic t-shirts, come and wave those flags. And I know all of you are out there, but this means something so much bigger in terms of our ability to connect with other Americans and push back against these efforts to divide us. So, speaking of things that we do together as Americans that unite us and allow us to exert that we the people power, Heather, let's touch on the fact that voting is happening in just 5 days. We are 5 days from the 2025 election. There have been elections happening throughout the year here and there on most Tuesdays in America. There's an election somewhere. But this coming Tuesday on November 4th, there are 53,000 open seats on the ballot all across the country. My community, probably yours, probably most of the people's on this call. Voting, in my mind, is the most freaking American thing any of us can do. What do you see as the significance of these 2025 elections in defending America?
So, the showing up, first of all, like you say, is crucial. And showing up to give a message to those people in power is also crucial. And, people sometimes make the mistake of thinking that some elections don't matter because it's not going to change who your representative is, or it's not going to change who the president is, or whatever. But what an election does is it signals to those people in power where the people are, where voters are. And right now, we're in this sort of knife edge in which there are a number of Republican lawmakers who are still apparently firmly in Donald Trump's camp, but who are interested in being reelected. And you can start to see there are some of them who are wavering. There was just a vote in the Senate yesterday, I think it was, on whether to continue tariffs on Brazil, and more Republican senators than ever broke off from that. Now, that was sort of a symbolic vote because the House won't take it up for other reasons, but you can start to see not just those people being concerned about what comes next, but also you can see younger people, and by younger, I don't necessarily mean age, I mean newer to the system, reading the tea leaves and saying, if I want to be elected, I'm going to need to move this direction, not more to the right in order to get elected. And if you need a symbol of that, Take a look at Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia. If you had ever thought you were going to pick somebody who was going to be embracing sort of more centrist views, would you have picked her? No, but what she's very good at is reading the room. And so now
Yeah.
she is moderating what she's doing. So in these elections, which many of which will be decided by turnout, but people are watching very closely to see who's got the momentum, and having the momentum to turn seats and to get propositions through and to get state judges elected and to get gubernatorial candidates over the finish line. People are going to be watching that, and it's going to set us up both for 2026, but also for how people act between next Tuesday and 2026. Because right now, if you're following the news, you know things are moving fast and they're moving hard. And the administration is trying to grab all the power it can because it recognizes how unpopular it is. But in order to make sure that they are not able to do that, we need a lot of people who are involved in the political system at lower levels, at places we may not be paying attention to as closely, to say, whoo, that doesn't look like I'm going to have much of a political career if I stay on that side. Now seems like a really good time to back off. So absolutely voting, turning out, getting your friends to turn out, and recognizing that this is a moment really to make your wishes heard. Again, you know they're nervous about it because of the fact that they've actually sent people to watch the polls in New Jersey and California, two places where there are major issues that on the ballot that the MAGA Republicans are very nervous about losing.
Heather, I'm so glad that you made that point, because I think that people sometimes, well, first of all, most Americans don't even know that we've got an election happening this coming Tuesday, which is what actually increases the power of every single person on this call so enormously. Turnout is going to be low. And so every single one of us can impact every single one we know to vote in these local elections. You can swing the whole election with, a handful of friends reaching out to the people that you know. And I promise you, anyone here who thinks, oh no, everyone I know votes, they don't in these odd year elections. We're going to give you a tool in a little while to even be able to check the voting record of anybody you know through the Red, Wine, and Blue app. It's public information, and you're going to see. So I promise you, you have so much power. But Heather, you so beautifully described how this not only impacts school board members in our local communities to protect our kids and our communities and our schools from these attacks at the federal level on public education, for example. But it also sends a message to every single person who's going to be on the ballot in 2026. That's huge. And I think that we all need to do a better job of communicating that out. Okay. I'm very excited to bring on a few people who have questions directly for you, Heather. We have asked, the first person we've asked to come and join us is Sarah Wiles. She lives in Florida, recently took a little trip to Indiana with her girlfriends for No King's Day, and pretty much went viral on Instagram for an amazing set of posts she did, clapping back when a conservative commentator said something like, oh, there they go with this No Kings thing. It's probably just going to be a bunch of old hippies and younger green hairs. And Sarah, tell us why it was so important to you to clap back, and what question do you have for Heather?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most beautiful part of No King's protests, and also just participating in our democracy by showing up to protests and in our communities, is that we showed them that we don't have a type, right? There's not one type of person that protests. There's not one color, one hair color, one age group. It's everyone. And I just really wanted to be someone to say that out loud and to make more space for people to realize that everybody is accepted at those No Kings protests and everywhere in our democracy.
Sarah, I also have to say, I loved how you were like, and by the way, I know everyone who looks like me is not here, but I'm coming for him. I'm coming for her. Me and my friends, we're coming for him.
We're all coming for them. We're taking them back. Heather, huge fan, and just thank you so much for everything that you do and have been doing. I think my biggest question for you, well, I'm going to ask two. I'm sorry, and they'll be quick. Number one is, what is giving you hope right now? And number two is, the question that people always ask me is, what's the best way for me to get involved? And I think that people make this so much harder than it needs to be. So I'd love to hear that from you.
So normally what I say when people ask me what gives me hope, I talk about things like this. I mean, these organizations that did not exist 10 years ago that are not just giving us communities, but that are really changing the country, articulating new principles, finding new ways to get people elected. There's a lot happening out there. But something Katie said earlier made me think that when we think about those communities, we are not only working in today's world, but when we express the values of democracy and the idea of an inclusive democracy and the idea of economic fairness and the sorts of principles that we care about, we're actually marching alongside the great heroes in our past. So, one of the things that gives me hope is the fact that we have certainly faced times in our past that looked as bleak or bleaker than we are in right now. And at the end of the day, the good guys won, and they won because they just kept putting one foot in front of another. And this time, we have deep organizations of women who, as I say, have skills and friendships and sometimes money, and they know how to organize. And that addition to the Democratic base, small d Democratic base to reclaim our country, it is a new era. And I find it very exciting to be part of it. So, what gives me hope is we've done it in the past. We can do it again going forward. In terms of getting involved, I think the best thing I've ever heard was someone said, "But there's only one of me," and the answer to that is get a friend. you know
Mm,
and there are, red wine and blue, obviously. When Katie says jump, I say how high, because she has been so good at organizing people. But there are places all over your communities and in your states, and certainly at the national level, but just simply in your town, reinforcing the ideas of community and friendship and democracy and making sure that people are included. You can do that just by knocking on your neighbor's door. And that very use of our sense of community and our sense of decency and our sense of creativity and our sense of joy is antithetical to the rise of authoritarianism, which by definition divides people, makes you afraid, makes you silent, makes you stop singing, makes you stop creating, and which is really designed to isolate people and make them alone and afraid. So you can get involved absolutely anywhere. And of course, now with the attacks on Snap, there's plenty of organizations to help find um, ways to get food to the people who are going to be hurting really badly starting pretty soon.
thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you, Sarah.
for your posts and going up to Indiana. Important state right now.
Very. My pleasure. Thank you.
Keep it going, Sarah. And everybody give Sarah Wiles a follow on Instagram. You will not regret it. Next up, I am really excited to ask Melinda Hale to join us. Melinda, you are executive director of the New Evangelicals. And, I don't know, Melinda, if we've ever talked about this, but I have done a lot of work organizing in the faith community and organizing with evangelicals. And sometimes people think, oh, wait, no, they think evangelical equals like a right-wing radical extremist. And I would love for you to share what your view on that might be as the leader of the New Evangelicals. And, I was saying earlier on this call how important I think it is to not cede the flag, to not cede faith. I see that in the same way.
Yeah,
If that's real for you and where your
sure.
authenticity, your
Well,
values come from.
I mean, evangelical just means to spread the good news. And so, what we're trying to do at our organization is not just spread the good news, but be the good news. We're trying to be the hands and feet of Jesus by showing up for people, by advocating, by loving our neighbor, because that is what we were called to do when we chose to follow this faith. So, it's been very difficult for us in our organization seeing our faith weaponized specifically to hurt people. And as Heather mentioned, with SNAP benefits going out, our organization is stepping up and offering grocery gift cards cards to people in need at this time, because that's what you're supposed to do when you claim to be a Christian. So that's what the organization is about, really showing up for people and leading and being that example.
Melinda, that's something I love so much. At many of the No King's Day rallies, there were opportunities for mutual aid or, to provide things, like grocery gift cards. I know Red, Wine, and Blues Trouble Nation groups, hundreds of them across the country, are taking on food drives and mutual aid projects and partnering with local food banks to really identify what they do need. And I'm curious, from where you sit, what your take has been. What has your feeling been since the No Kings rally? And what have you been telling people about engaging right now? And I know you have a question for Heather, too.
I do. Yeah. I mean, it's been a mix for sure. I mean, there's no way to not feel hopeful when you see that many people mobilize for the same cause and knowing what the power of the people can be. But it's also heartbreaking knowing that we are in this position and that the powers that be are trying to convince us that change isn't possible. And in the weeks since the rally, I've really been having conversations with people that maybe if you didn't show up for a rally, that's not necessarily the only way that you can stay engaged. Choosing to continue to have conversations, to be in community with other people, and not allowing silence to be what drives you. I know a lot of people are choosing neutrality in moments like this, and maybe it's for a mental health stance, but we have to keep speaking up and we have to keep being together and speaking out. So I tell people, pace yourselves, because there is a lot being thrown at us at once. But don't disengage. You have to stay active and you have to stay in the moment, because it's very important for all of us to show up.
Oh my gosh, Melinda, Red, Wine, and Blue just launched a new podcast. Heather's been a guest. It's called How to Not Lose Your Shit. And you are going to need to be a guest on this, girl.
I would love it.
It is hard right now to make a difference and not lose your shit. And all right, that's happening. Okay. Heather can vouch for it. She's already been a guest. Okay. All right. Melinda, what is your question for Heather?
Sure. So, Heather, obviously, we've been hearing a lot of rhetoric from extremists that are saying people pushing for change somehow hate America. And I always think of this James Baldwin quote that says, "I love America more than any other country in the world. And exactly for that reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually." And for me, as someone, a person of faith, that it calls me to care for others and to stand up. And activism to me is synonymous with love. So how can we help more people understand that working to protect rights of others and expand equality is a moral commitment to America and not a rejection of it?
So, first of all, thanks for everything you're doing. And the voice of evangelicals like yourself is so important in this moment. And it's something I've been watching really with interest, because, as you say, there is this sense that if you are an evangelical Christian, you are a radical Republican, which is deeply problematic in any number of ways, not least of all theological. But the idea that in order to love the country, you need to change it. You need to reform it. You need to be engaged. You need to engage with it, is actually the heart of democracy and of exactly what people like you are doing. So when you were talking, all I could hear was this idea from the late 19th century, where evangelicals stepped up and said, we've got to create a nation that is fair, that is better for people, that is decent. And it became a different kind of politics and became incredibly powerful in that moment. So the idea that you're actually not liking America in that moment, when you're trying to improve it, always makes me, because of what I do, not reach back to religion, but rather back to history, and really to emphasize that the moment that we are in is really unusual. It is a radical moment, but the people like you and the people like that are on this call, we are not the radicals. We are the people who are actually tapping into our longer history and reflecting those pieces of it. So, for example, this whole idea of in order to be a man, you've got to be this cowboy-like figure who throws around a gun and, orders around women and so on. That's actually a really radical image that only was powerful for certain political reasons in a very small space of time. In fact, Americans generally urged men not to be sort of these wild cowboys, but rather to nurture communities and to support the schools and the churches and to have strong families and all the sorts of things that that cowboy mentality ignores. So when people think about the idea that, you have to say it's all great and everything is great, that's actually really radical. It's an authoritarian way to look at the world. And what America has always been at its very best is people doing exactly what you're saying, trying to make it better. And, one of the things that you identified there, I think, is interesting because you mentioned poetry. And I, for weird reasons, was reading Langston Hughes's Let America Be America Again, which is one of my all-time favorites. And that whole idea that in order to make America what it never has been, we've all got to put our shoulders to the wheel. Nothing could be more American than that. So I would say just keep doing it and speaking up about it and saying anybody who says it was perfect in the past is making it up because it's never been perfect in the past.
Right. Thank you so much.
Melinda, thank you so much for joining us. I love what you're doing so much, and we'll keep working together, and we will have you on the How to Not Lose Your Shit podcast.
Can't wait.
Very
Thank
soon.
you
We
for
need
having me.
we need
Good
you.
to meet you.
Okay, next up, Heather, I'm so excited to have Amira Winninger on. Hello.
Hi, it's so exciting to be here.
Heather, Amira is one of Red Wine and Blue's Trouble Nation group leaders, and her group is for military spouses living all over the country. Most of the Trouble Nation groups are geographically based, bringing together people who live in the same communities. But in Amira's case, we have spouses who are moving all over the country pretty regularly from base to base. And so her group is called Operation Unite. So, Amira, tell us why you did that and your question for Heather, of course.
Sure. So I come from a long line of military service. My grandfather was shot storming the beaches of Normandy in World War II. My dad served for 30 years on the active duty before retiring and joining the civil service for 20 additional years. And my husband still gets up every day, despite the attacks that are occurring to our military, the weaponization of our military and the politicization of our military. He still gets up every morning, puts on his uniform, and goes to work. But these attacks and the weaponization of the military is really hurtful for those of us like myself who don't need to be reminded that we love America every single day. So my question is, historically, how do these kinds of attacks undermine our national identity?
The kinds of attacks on the military?
Yes, this weaponization of military, trying to make it one-sided that the military is his military and not all of our military.
I think this is a really important question, and it's really worth unpacking. And, one of the things that I talk a lot about whenever I do a live event is the fact that many people, and again, to me, it seems like people put together the military with bad things that has happened with the military and with immigration and customs enforcement and with border patrol and so on. Because what you're hearing is in these moments in the country right now, where you've got ICE, for example, and especially Customs and Border Patrol, which are at odds right now. Both of them are way overstepping, but certainly Border Patrol is the one who's been coming in with Black Hawk helicopters to Chicago and so on. People are saying the military has turned out. And I keep saying it's not the military. Those people are not the military. And the military has this long service of its own that makes it, I always think of the military, honestly, sort of like historians, because we serve the country, but not today. We serve the country in a much longer period. So the thing about where we are, I think that's really important. And it's really important that people understand that. And the other thing that I always like to emphasize is that people need to understand that the military does have its own history that is often ends up at odds with politics. And politicians often try to use the military in ways that the military doesn't want to be used. But in this moment, we have something going on that we have never had before. And that is the deliberate politicization. And I agree with you, that's a terrible word, but the deliberate attempt to politicize the military, which does absolutely nothing for that longer history, but also undermines the military's ability to serve America. And that, it's actually heartbreaking. And I mean, I don't need to preach to you about that. But one of the things that, weirdly, the whole reason we got the Electoral College was because of the fact that the framers were concerned about the possibility of the Order of the Cincinnatus, which was associated with, of course, George Washington, but also with the military officers during the Revolutionary War, that they might be able to mobilize in a political fashion. And so the framers created the Electoral College that has it doesn't meet in the same place politics do. Is you can't have a job, you can't have any jobs in the service. There's all sorts of ways they tried to make sure the military could not be involved in politics. So, I can't tell you what has ever happened really in the past, because there's been such a huge effort not to politicize the military ever. And here we are where that's happening. And one of the ways that I think people like me can push back on that is to emphasize that ICE and CBP are not the military, and that the military does not want to be part of this. They've been pretty clear about that with the rate, for example, of reenlistments of the Federalized National Guard in Los Angeles is way lower than the usual reenlistments are. And just try and support people like you and people like your husband to say, we appreciate what you're doing. And we're really sorry that you're stuck in this horrible place, because it's going to be really important to have the military on the side of democracy going forward, especially in the next several months, as they're making such a play to politicize that military and get it into Democratic dominated cities before polling takes place. So more power to you. I wish I had a better answer.
Thank you. No, that was a great answer. And since we do have so many on this call, I'm just going to take a moment to reiterate what Heather just said, that the military does not want to be involved in this. Maybe there are a few, but for the very vast majority, they do not. So just thank your service members, thank your veterans in your area, and remind them that we are on their side too. Just like the flag, the military is all of ours.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your whole family service, Amira. Thank you for all you're doing to serve other military spouses as well. We are so behind you. Heather, wasn't that an incredible lineup of people with their questions?
What I really want to know is, how did you manage to find such cool people who all have such cool names?
Don't they?
Yeah, they really do.
That's the power of this community, Heather. It's just people ask me sometimes, because we work really hard here and there's always something happening. And we all know just the fire hose of news that you translate for us every single day. And then in the midst of that, empowering people with concrete things to do. And here we are in the midst of get out the vote. There's no question it's exhausting. But the answer to how I know I get through this is because women like Amira and Melinda and Sarah are my fuel. It's literally just feels like a hope infusion every single day. And their stories, I hope everyone on this call experiencing their stories and your beautiful answers to their questions gave them that too. And in fact, I know it did, because they told us in the chat. We have this real-time feedback. Some people have asked a few questions I want to get to. First of all, yes, this is being recorded. You will be able to find a recording of this on Red Wine and Blue's YouTube channel. And also, if anyone RSVP'd and they missed this, you can tell your friends. We'll email them that link to make sure that they have it in their inbox. And then the other question I just wanted to ask, Heather, and I'm sure this comes up a lot to you, but we are going to be focusing on how we can impact these elections in 5 days. We're getting very close to the moment when we are all going to unleash everyone here. There've been around at least 10,000 people who have joined us in this conversation. That is so many votes we can influence tonight, people, and so much organizing we can do on the ground. I'm so excited about that. But Heather, there are people who feel, for good reasons, very nervous about the state not just of our democracy overall, but in a very concrete way, our voting systems. And there's some sense I hear sometimes of like, well, how can I even trust it at all? To go and show up and vote this coming Tuesday. How do you answer that?
Well, I'm going to answer it by answering something about the First Amendment. Somebody once was talking to me about how they were self-censoring. That is sort of going to say something on social media or whatever, and then thinking, "Oh, maybe I don't want to put this out there." And the reality is, if you are self-censoring, you have already lost your First Amendment rights. And what I would say about voting is the same. That is, yes, there are barriers that are going up, and there are people who are trying desperately to make sure that we lose our democratic system and get what instead is called competitive authoritarianism, which is where there will be elections, but essentially we already know how they're all going to come out, which is what happens in a place like Russia now. And by the way, which the United States had in the American South from about 1874 to 1965. So we have our own homegrown version as well, speaking of things that weren't always great in our past. But all those things are true, and it means we're going to have to work harder to vote. We're going to have to work harder to make sure our votes are counted. But if you decide it is not worth your turning out because you're afraid that it's not going to be counted or that the system is rigged or whatever, you have already lost your right to vote. So, it's like I say, I'm very concerned as well about many, many things. But I also recognize that the vast majority of Americans are against the idea of losing our democracy and replacing it with an authoritarian system. And someday we're going to get back to democracy. There's no doubt about it in my mind, none at all. But the difference between whether it happens in 40 years or 20 years or 10 years or 5 years or 2 years or 1 year or this year is about how many of us are willing to make the effort to guarantee that we don't lose it in the first place. Because once we've lost it, it'd be much harder to get it back. And you know that they are afraid that we are going to take it back because they're trying so hard to make it impossible to vote, to gerrymander so that the Democrats can never win control of the House of Representatives, to try all these different ways to make sure the majority in the United States is going to fail. And as I say, I'm just like Thomas Paine here. I do, but when he wrote, about the summer soldier, the American crisis, we are going to get our democracy back, but I would really like it to come back in my lifetime. So rather than sort of putting our heads under the sand for the next 2 or 3 generations, now's the time. This is our time to get out there, to hold firm, to exercise the right to vote, to get our friends out there voting, to continue to put pressure on our electeds, to continue to make it easier for other people to vote, and to create the kind of nation that we want to have going forward. So my answer is, if you think it's too late to vote, then it is. But if you still believe in democracy, get out there and do your absolute hardest job to make sure that your vote is registered, counted, and that you make a difference.
So tell me in the chat, everyone, do you still believe in democracy? Do you still believe in loving this country enough to fight for it? I'm seeing a lot of yeses. Can I get some hell yeses? This is why I love this community. This is why it's a hope infusion every time we get on these Zoom calls together.
I mean, just think of one of my great heroes is Fannie Lou Hamer.
Yes.
She was beaten by police officers almost to death for registering people to vote. And you know what she said? She said, "What are you going to do? All there is left that you can do is to kill me." And at the end of the day, who manages to get people in the American South registered to vote? Who manages to change the system? Who manages to speak at the 1964 Democratic National Convention, or not at it, but tried to put pressure on it? And from that, she speaks outside of it. And from that, we get the 1965 Voting Act. Believe me, when she was laying on the ground almost dead, She wasn't thinking that she was going to be moving any balls forward. And yet at the end of the day, she not only did that, we still remember her and she still inspires us. And that's a great way, I think, to think about our role. Just put one foot in front of the other.
Yes.
R-W-B. 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 Look around, there's something going down, but we're looking up. No matter how they try to take us down, we're gonna keep it up. We move with confidence, we're making a difference wherever we are. Good trouble is not too far. We've got the fire, we've got the grit, through the thick of it. So powerful we are. So powerful we are. So if you see us coming, just know we're making a change and we're not running. No, we're not going away. We stand together and we can stop the rain. Just know that if we came to make a change. Make a change, make a change, make a change. Oh yes, we came to make a change. Make a change, make a change, make a change, make a change. Oh yes, we came to make a change. Our sisterhood may be misunderstood, but we know we're never alone. Under the pressure, we still fight together for our freedom to stand on our own. And we move with confidence, we're making a difference wherever we are. Good trouble is not too far. We've got the fire, we've got the grit, through the thick of it. So powerful we are. So powerful we are. So if you see us coming, just know we're making a change and we're not running. No, we're not going away. We stand together and we can stop the rain. Just know that if we came to make a change. Make a change, make a change, make a change. Oh yes, we came to make a change. Make a change, make a change, make a change, make a change. Oh yes, we came to make a change. Together, side by side, troublemakers, heads held high. Oh, the journey may be long, but we still keep singing our song. So if you see us coming, just know we're making a change and we're not running. No, we're not going away. We stand together. And we can stop the rain. Just know that if we came to make a change. If you see us coming, just know we're making a change and we're not running. No, we're not going away. We stand together. And we can stop the rain. Just know that if we came to make a change. Make a change, make a change, make a change. Oh yes, we came to make a change. Make a change, make a change, make a change, make a change. Oh yes, we came to make a change. R-W-B. We came to make a change. R-W-B. We came to make a change.